What a powerful anthem. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you to Michael and the choir. And I remind you that after today, they're going on vacation until August the 16th. And we hope you have a good break. But next Sunday, the volunteer choir will be up here. And that could be you. If you'd like to be in it, just get in touch with Michael and be a part of the volunteer choir. And while I'm making some musical announcements, because I already forgot it once, our hymn of invitation this morning is 601, not the hymn that's in your bulletin. That kind of got left over from last week. But 601, I'm Thine, O Lord, is our hymn of invitation today. Today's a fun day. It's a big day. It's a party. It's a celebration. Today we're celebrating 72 years of Woodmont Christian Church. Happy birthday, Woodmont. And as most of you know, and as it says on the insert in your bulletin, Woodmont was started or born or birthed in July of 1943, which was right in the middle of World War II, when Vine Street Christian Church, which back then was downtown, decided that we needed a Christian church on the outskirts of Nashville. They felt it was important for the Christian church to be represented not just downtown, but way out there in the country, which is what Hillsborough Road and Woodmont Boulevard was back then. The 51 charter members of Woodmont called Dr. Frank Drowoda from Mayfield, Kentucky, to be the first minister. And then they purchased a 4-story residence, which today we call the mansion, where the church offices are. And that, to begin with a combination parsonage for the Drowoda family and worship center and Sunday school rooms. And if you talk to Frank or Claire Drowoda Carpenter, they will tell you that the family lived on the second floor. The worship center was on the first floor. Sunday school rooms were on first and third and probably second floor too. But when you came to church, you knew what the Drowodas were having for lunch because you could smell it cooking. And back then they paid a whopping $35,000 for that 4-story home. 6 years later, in 1949, the church held its first worship service in this beautiful sanctuary, although at the time it was not completely finished. But then over the years, Woodmont has expanded and grown and built again 7 different times. In 1958, 59, 60, 1986, 1989, 2002, and 2015. Woodmont has also had 6 senior ministers during its history. The longest serving so far was Dr. Drowoda, who was here for 30 years. We got a young guy that could, go for that record. Maybe he will. Who knows? So my question this morning is, what is it that has made Woodmont Christian Church such a vital, dynamic church for Jesus Christ for so many years and is still strong and growing as a body of Christ today, especially in a time when most churches are actually declining? Somehow, I guess the Spirit led me during the 9:30 service to think it's our 72nd birthday. I wonder what hymn 72 is. And if you look at hymn 72, it'll tell you why Woodmont has been so strong. The title of the hymn is "To God Be the Glory." And that's what Woodmont is all about. But how do we give glory to God? What are the means through which that happens? 2 other factors in my book that make the difference. One is that of the ministers that have served Woodmont. And secondly, its members, or what some call the clergy and the laity, or the pastor and the people. I remember when I was in divinity school at Vanderbilt, Professor Jim Glass, Dr. Glass, was giving a sermon one day, and he was talking about the clergy and the laity, or the preachers and the laity, and he said, "What's the difference?" He said, "The preachers preach and the laity lay." But that's really has never been true here at Woodmont. Now, you've probably heard the jokes and even the songs about you might be a redneck if. Well, I thought I'd give you a little different version today. It's called You Might Be a Minister If. You might be a minister if you ever received an anonymous U-Haul gift certificate. Or if you ever fell asleep during the sermon only to discover you were the one preaching. You might be a minister if you find yourself counting people at a sporting event. Or if you're leading your church into the 21st century and you don't even know what you're going to preach next Sunday. You might be a minister if you'd rather negotiate with a terrorist than a church musician. No reflection on Michael here, let me tell you. He's a good one. You might be a minister. You might be a minister if you'd like to fire the congregation and form a congregational search committee. You might be a minister if you secretly have a desire for the worship committee to drench you in Gatorade right after a really good sermon. Or if you've ever gone to the Dairy Queen and ordered a church split. You might be a minister if you wanted to tell your secretary who was the real boss at the church. Now, I don't want to just talk about ministers. I want to include you too. So I've got another version called You Might Be a Church Member. And it kind of goes like this. You might be a church member if you find yourself looking at your watch about 11:40 and tapping on it to see if it's still running. You might be a church member if you find yourself saying to somebody at the movie theater, "Excuse me, you're sitting in my seat." Or if you feel that Commitment Sunday is a good day to catch up on your rest. Or if you had a dream that you fell asleep during the middle of the pastor's sermon only to wake up and discover you did. You might be a church member if you try and get a discount at Sony's restaurant on Sunday with your church bulletin when you didn't even go to church Sunday. Or if your teenagers have left home but you still think the music's too loud. Or if you find yourself sitting on the very back row of the symphony hall or a concert or a sporting event when you actually have tickets on the very front row. Now that's a lot of fun, and someday I'm going to write a book entitled The Other Side of the Pulpit. But seriously, I think it has been the ministers that have served Woodmont over the 72 years and the members, the people, the laity of the church that have made this such a great and successful church for Jesus Christ. And by successful, we mean winning people to Christ. Dr. Drewota started off very strong, and I think your senior minister today is doing a pretty good job of keeping it that way. As far as the laity or the church members are concerned, Woodmont started out with some very strong families by the name of Carpenter or Sensing or Hawkins, Matthias, Kelly, Reed, Sargent, Williams. Others I know come to your mind. And all of these families still are represented in the church today. I think one of the signs of a strong church, which doesn't happen much anymore, is multi-generations of the same family in the church. And as I listened to special music this morning with two girls named Music and Huffman, and I thought, wow, the next generation continues. Or Mary Claire Carpenter singing when her great-grandfather was one of the ones that helped establish this church. But what is it that the ministers and the members have done to make Woodmont such a dynamic church? Obviously, it's got to be something more than just showing up on Sunday mornings. A number of years ago, I participated in a 3-year program that took us all across the country to the largest, most dynamic churches in America. Churches like Saddleback in California and Willow Creek outside of Chicago, and the largest Methodist and Presbyterian and Disciples of Christ churches, to see if we could figure out what it is that makes the difference in reaching people for Jesus Christ in this modern world. Why were these churches so successful? Why were they especially successful in reaching the younger generation? And what I saw in every one of the churches we visited, I saw 4 characteristics that I think made the difference and have made the difference here at Woodmont and will continue to make the difference as long as we continue to do it. What are those 4 characteristics? The first one is an enthusiasm of the people, always positive, always excited, always upbeat. They're excited about belonging to Christ and carrying out his mission and his ministry. I remember being at Saddleback Church. That's a huge church, 26,000 members or so. And I got there early to get a good seat, and my seat was way up in the top of the bleachers in the back. But I had 20 minutes before church began, and I couldn't help but look down and watch this one usher whose job was simply to greet people, give them a bulletin, and help them find a seat. And I mean, he was all over it. He was so excited about what he was doing for Christ. The minute you walked in there, you just felt good because this guy greeted you so warmly and with great love and took you to find your seat. It's kind of like the scripture in Ephesians 4 said this morning, that in the church we belong to one another. And when you walk in, you can feel that you belong. I love it when first-time visitors here at Woodmont say to me, they say, wow, the minute I walked in the door, I could feel there was something in the air. The excitement and the sense of belonging that's there. A second characteristic in every church that is reaching people for Christ today is the powerful role of music. And obviously we know that with the great music we have at Woodmont. Music that's always exciting and upbeat. That's what reaches people today. But it's music that can stir your soul when it needs stirring and soothe your soul when it needs soothing. A third characteristic of dynamic churches is that they have a genuine passion to reach that 75% of our society today that would be called unchurched, people that aren't going to church anywhere. They're always excited about reaching out with the good news of Jesus Christ, not just with their words, but with their loving deeds, actions, outreach ministries of the church. I always say that as long as there's one person anywhere in Nashville, Tennessee, who is lonely or thinks nobody cares, or they're struggling with problems, or they don't feel like they have any hope, we want to reach them with the love of Jesus Christ. And the fourth characteristic that undergirds every powerful, successful church is that of the power of prayer. The people believe in and are excited about the difference prayer can make, and they know it's true from their own personal experience. But even beyond those 4 characteristics, I would also say that I think the single most important characteristic that I saw in those churches, that I've seen here at Woodmont, that brings growing numbers of new people to the churches today, in spite of the fact that there are so many other things you could be doing on Sunday morning, in spite of the fact that there's so much criticism of institutional religion today, is the fact that people's lives are being changed. It doesn't matter whether those churches are all the way downtown or in Midtown or in the suburbs or even out in the country. People are willing to drive even an hour or more one way to get to those churches because people's lives are being changed. When I say being changed, I'm not talking about the kind of change Billy Graham once described when he said he was flying on a plane somewhere, and there was a man on the plane who was very intoxicated and very loud and profane and obnoxious. The flight attendant was trying to quiet him down, and when he'd do it, she said, when he wouldn't quiet down, she said, "You need to watch your language. Don't you know the Reverend Billy Graham is on this flight?" "Where is he?" said the drunk. "Right behind you," the attendant said. Well, he turned around, shook Billy Graham's hand, and he says, "Reverend Graham, I always wanted to meet you because your message has changed my life." And Billy Graham always said he wondered what message that guy was hearing. But that's not the kind of change I'm talking about. The kind of change I'm talking about is the example of another man who wanted to stand up in front of a church that was full of people and share with them what had happened in his life because he was so humbly grateful for it. He told how God had given him a second chance in learning how to love and respect his wife after many years of a relationship that had been almost non-existent. Like many people, he said he was ill-prepared for marriage, and he certainly wasn't prepared to be the father of 3 children. He had always put other things first, ahead of his family, and he tried to numb his feelings of guilt by turning to alcohol. He said he always went to church on Sunday with his family, but he said that Jesus Christ was not a part of his weekday life. And soon his drinking led him to all kinds of parties and social gatherings, which led to affairs. He said he had no respect for himself or for his wife or his family. His values, his morals broke down. He said his heart was hardened, and he admitted he was a full-blown alcoholic as well as a practicing liar. And he said, I even began to believe my own lies. His marriage was filled with anger and resentment, and he and his wife had no respect for each other. For days on end, there would be a heavy, murky silence between them. But then he said, thanks to the fact that God never gives up on us, he began to see how the gospel of Christ really does have a lot to do with our happiness in life. He began to attend a recovery group. For 14 months now, he hadn't had a drink. But even greater than that, his damaged relationship with his wife began to amend, because somehow God had enabled his wife to forgive him, and they were working together to save their marriage. And the message he so badly wanted to share with others who were in the same place he was in their lives right now was that if your relationship with God is all messed up, so will your other relationships be messed up. But if you give Jesus Christ the honor he deserves in your life, he will fill you with his love, help you restore relationships that you might think are even beyond repair right now. In other words, God can and will change and restore lives no matter how badly they are messed up. That's why God sent Jesus into this world, because he loves the world. He wants to save the world. He wants to save us from self-destruction. This is the good news that Woodmont has proclaimed in word and deed for 72 years now. And Jesus Christ changes lives one at a time, including yours and mine, and can make them better than we even dreamed possible. Jesus began changing lives with his original 12 disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, Matthew, the tax collector. He changed the lives of prostitutes, lepers, and other social outcasts. He changed the lives of the high and the mighty, as well as the low and the hopeless. And he continues to change lives today. I can't tell you how many lives I've seen changed over the years when people took their relationship with Christ seriously. I have seen drug addicts and alcoholics overcome their addictions because they came to know Jesus. I have seen people survive tragic divorces and even the death of a child because they came to know and trust Jesus. I've seen people who were lonely and afraid now find joy in living because they've come to know Jesus. I've seen people fighting cancer and other diseases do incredibly well because they put their trust in their Lord. I've seen people who have had their lives completely torn apart pick up the pieces, put them back together, and find joy and meaning again because they let the power of Christ help them. I've seen people become far more than they ever were before because they've come to know Jesus. And I have known many people who were wealthy, who had everything to live with, but their lives were empty because they had nothing really to live for until Christ taught them what life is all about. And just ask them what a difference Jesus makes and the difference he can make in our lives. That's what makes Woodmont a great church. That's why we have reason to celebrate 72 years. Lives are being transformed right here, right now, from fear to courage, from selfishness to generosity, from inner turmoil and confusion to inner peace and joy, from resentment to forgiveness, from hurt to healing, from negative to positive, from egotistical to humble. And again, it can only happen in a community of followers of Christ who are like Ephesians 4 describes, because we know that we are a part of one another. So happy birthday to Woodmont, and I invite you all to come back 72 years from now when we will again.